Okay guys, so this is where we're at right now. Now I haven't really done anything to this. You do notice that there's a couple little creases. It's okay. It's just from me putting it in my bag. So at this time, we want to go ahead and get some of these darks and lights in there, as well as some of the cross hatching. Now, this larger stick is going to have a darker tone than the skinnier one, but it's also going to be a lot harder to get those nice fine points. Now, we're going to go ahead and discuss how to get those dark points in just a second, but I want to go ahead right now and address the biggest issue, which is the size of the head for this little dinosaur. So if we look back at the original dinosaur, as you see here, I'm going to go ahead and zoom out just a little bit so you can really get a better look. He has a much bigger head, looking at him from the side view, trying to match the perspective so you can really see what I'm talking about. So the side view, you can see he has a much larger head and larger feet than my original sketch had it out. And this is a little bit more narrow and this is more wide. So we're going to go ahead, I'm going to go ahead and place him back down, so that I can match the perspective that I had originally as best that I can. There's always going to be a few adjustments if you're moving from a still life. That's okay. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and go in with the smaller one just to finesse and make the shapes a little bit closer to the shape that I need. So in this case, I'm going to hold it right down by the tip. This gives you the most control over where your lines are going to go. And you literally just draw your new lines in place. I'm going to show you how that blends out in just a moment. So I'm going to go, all I'm doing right here is fixing that shape. Now this one, again, this starts out a little bit more narrow. So I'm just going to bring in the shadows just a little bit more up on top and down on the bottom. By doing that, it's going to make it appear larger, like it was always large to begin with, as you can see right there. Now I'm also going to adjust this side right here and the size of the feet. They're a little bit more squared off in the original, and they taper downwards just a little bit more. So I'm going to go ahead and just sketch in the new details right on top of the old ones. I'm not erasing them, I'm just changing them. Leave the old ones in place. That's part of the look when it comes to charcoal. Most people just leave their lines in place. As you work, it's going to start creating this small tip right here. This is going to be very helpful for you later on to get those hatching in. So go ahead and just keep going and fix those lines real quick. I'm going to do this very quickly and speed myself up, not in reality, or not in the computer, but just in reality, just kind of pausing because for whatever reason, I draw faster when I'm not talking. So I'm going to go ahead and take a second, and I'm going to go with the very tip again. This time I'm going to use that pointed edge to go and add in more space and redraw the head using most of this, as many of the same lines of the original lines that I can. Notice I'm turning the paper. This is just a way for me to get a different angle in the actual drawing. So that head is much better proportioned than it originally was. So I'm going to go ahead and erase some of these lines with the white eraser that is on the desk. Any white eraser will actually work, but you want to go ahead and go in and erase the extra lines as best as you can with those white erasers. Not the kneaded eraser, because the kneaded eraser is good for small details, not so much these large swaths of areas to erase. You just want to erase as much of that space, those extra lines as you can, but you want to still leave stuff. Now, if you touch it like that and you leave smears, you can just go in and press down and just pull the eraser down. You're not rubbing with the erasers for charcoal. You want to just pull your erasers down. Again, you're not rubbing with, you're doing an erasing for charcoal. You're just pulling downwards. Pull down, pull across. You're pulling the direction that you want the erasing to go. Now that I have a better shape in place, I'm going to go ahead and go in with the darker one. So at this point, I'm going to start adding my cross hatching. My cross hatching is for the spaces that I want to be extra dark. So I'm going to start by going sideways. And I've already blended most of my shades out. So I can go in and start adding my finer details. Tracing out the outlines just on some spots, not the whole thing. And making sure that I have dark spaces. Now, I said earlier that I would go ahead and show you how to really get a nice fine tip. And the easiest way to do this is to get a scrap piece of paper, press down very hard, and just push the same direction over and over and over and over on the same spot. Now, you can still use this, so don't throw it away. So you're going to keep going, turn just a little, turn a little the other direction, and it's going to slowly make a tip that you can work with. And again, you can still use this in your shading. I'll show you where you can use that in a second and how to go ahead and do this, because you want to go ahead and use that. So you're going to flip it completely over now and just slowly turn it. And what's going to happen is you're going to get a nice fine point on the end of your charcoal. So I'm going to move this scrap paper back out of the way. And I'm going to start adding my cross hatching lines back in very lightly. Go the other direction. Remember, cross hatching, the darker you want the space to be, the closer together you want your hatches to be. And you're not going to completely erase them later. We're going to blend them out just a little bit, but you want to leave some of these hatching lines in place in order to really get that nice texture into your art piece. So I'm going to go ahead and go underneath, add my lines, and I'm going to switch to a smaller one now to add more of my cross hatching, and it's going to create, when I sharpen it, as I showed you, the same way that I showed you before, okay? It's a slightly lighter black. I know that you probably can't see it on camera, but it's very useful to have multiple tones. And again, it's making that nice sharp point right there. I'm going to move that back out of the way. And this is going to give me a little bit more control and some much finer lines. I'm going to go over the entire thing, adding in the wood grain of my little dinosaur. And I'm going over the entire thing this time. Now it's got a curve in its wood grain, and that's okay. I'm going to go ahead and just add that wood grain in, because these lines won't completely erase while we're doing the blending. Now I know it looks a bit of a mess right now, so I'm going to go ahead and go in with my blending stump and my finger. Now with my finger, I'm just going to smooth my hand over the top of the tail right here, just to give it a little bit more of a soft note. I'm just touching those spaces where I think it's a little bit too harsh. Just touching it with my finger. I'm not erasing. I don't have an eraser in my hand. I'm using my finger and picking up that charcoal in those spaces and following the grain of my lines. Now I'm going to go in with the blending stump. Now the blending stump is a great tool to pick up charcoal from one space and put it into another. So I want to go ahead and soften these shadows down here. So I just picked up the charcoal from the other page and I'm putting it right in this space. Notice it still keeps that hatching, but it's creating a softer shadow for underneath the dinosaur. And you can go back and forth, blend it out. You can blend it out with your finger to make it even softer, but it's still going to keep some of these lines, and that's what's important, that you keep some of those lines. It also gives you a little bit more control about where you can blend out and make these nice crisp edges around your object. So I'm going to go ahead and highlight right there, and to create some of these more subtle highlights and shadows, you can go in with the blending stump to soften some shadows and edges while darkening others with your pencil. I just realized I'm out of screen for that little bit. I'm going to scooch this up just a little bit. Now, at this point, I'm going to take just a regular eraser. It's still a regular eraser, just like this. It's just a white one. Those of you that are in person, I do have a couple of these that you can use to get some highlights in just specific spaces and give you a little bit more control with erasing. So again, I'm just pulling some of that shadow off of there using a straight line, just to get some nice popped areas of color. Pulling, 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 not rubbing, pulling the eraser in the same direction. So this time I'm going to go over the top with the large eraser because I want to go straight the same direction. Don't put a new direction. You're not going back and forth. You're not going up and down. You're going to go the same direction that you went with the hatchet. This part's blended a lot more, so I'm going to go back over here, pick up some more charcoal from this side where I sharpened. I'm going to go in here and I'm just going to blend this out because inside the front of the lamp, it's a little bit darker, but it's a lot smoother. This is where the kneaded eraser comes in. And we're going to go ahead and continue to finesse, and I'll add some more details like the lights and the bolts tomorrow.